Hi there, Dr. Carmen McGuinness here with you. Tonight we're going to talk about reading the signs in new relationships, how to recognize going in those things that you didn't like when you were going out the last time. Stay with me. In the legal world, January is known as Divorce Month. In my field, psychology, and in education, we're well aware of the almost doubled divorce rates in January. For my clients and my students in my private school, December is often filled with tension and strained emotions. It's the last month that the family will be together, intact. My own divorce happened in December, on the 23rd, because I wanted to wake up on the other side of it. Well, I know. I'm a psychologist. I should know better, right? Today, 6 years after that divorce, I do know better. And my ex-husband and I actually continue to share Christmas together with our children and his mother. I don't recommend this for everyone. This is not always an easy arrangement, but it has generally worked out for us. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to talk about recognizing the signs that a relationship won't work very, very early on so that you don't repeat history. Perhaps even before the relationship actually takes off. And that brings us to my very first point today, my very first piece of advice. If you're taking notes, write this down. Number 1, go slow. I know we live in a fast-paced world. Swipe left, swipe right. I don't internet date, but those of you who do know that things can happen really quickly. And they happen really quickly in other venues as well. For many people, the workplace is where you meet people. I haven't been that fortunate myself. I mostly work with women, families, and children, so that doesn't work out. In my world, there's a large social circle and a rich events calendar. People come and go, and sometimes someone hones into view who seems like he or she might be more than an acquaintance. Regardless of how you meet potential partners, go slow. If you haven't written that down yet, please do so now. And this takes us to my second point. Number 2, don't just go slow. Don't make the mistake of waiting for him or her to sweep you off of your feet. That's not what I mean by going slow. Instead, I would like you to be actively involved in watching, listening, and noticing the signs. In the olden days, we called it getting to know the other person. Now, here's where most people can sometimes get lost. I'm not talking about the sorts of signs like signs from the universe signs, although those are great too. Like signs like a dove is roosting in a teacup that he left on your back porch the last time you two were hanging out together, although that would be a rather cool sign, wouldn't it? But those are not the kinds of signs I'm talking about. I'm talking more about the kinds of signs that would preclude the relationship working. These are the things that the last guy or girl, or if you're of a certain age, the last several guys or girls, said or didn't say, did or didn't do, that were glaringly obvious to you on breakup day. Much has been said about hindsight. Believe me, I understand that hindsight is wonderful, but I want to give you a slightly different perspective on hindsight today. I'm going to quote the cultural historian Friedrich von Schlegel, who wrote these words: "The historian is a prophet looking backward. And what I'd like to propose to you is that you are your own prophet because you have your own history. So you can look backward and then you can turn and look forward and say, yeah, that didn't work out for me and that's not what I'm going to do next. So indeed, unless you are quite young, you can look backwards. You have your history to guide you. So again, my second point is to use that history often and use it wisely. If you haven't written that part down yet, do so now. Now, this doesn't mean ruminating. That's not what I'm advising at all. But all too often in our desire to escape an unpleasant history with someone, we escape the lessons as well. I'll offer some examples from clients. We'll start with Carla, whose second husband was an alcoholic. After speaking in depth with her, I feel that her first husband possibly was too, but we definitely know that her second husband was an alcoholic. When Carla found herself courted by a neighbor friend, as she referred to Dan, she missed the signs entirely initially. The two were friends. They would hang out, barbecue in her garden. They would go for walks, walk the dogs together, that sort of thing. It was very much of a neighborhood relationship. And eventually, it became sexual. It was when it did that Dan was leaving for work one morning, and Carla found him standing by the bar cabinet in her kitchen and saw that he was taking a shot of bourbon before he went off to work. So unfortunately, it had to get to that more intimate place, sexually intimate place, before the signs were apparent to her. She had only ever seen him drinking beer and the odd bourbon in the evening. She had not seen him taking a drink before he left for work in the morning. So today, Carla describes their relationship as friends again, and that's wonderful. She believes that she avoided a crisis by finding out early and letting him know that she was not going to be involved in a relationship with him. And here's another one from a client. We'll call him Jack. Jack is 52 years old. His last two girlfriends were newly divorced and were, by their own admission, on the move for new husbands. Jack liked that fast-moving energy that those sorts of women who are looking for a man provided for him. He felt loved again, in his own words, and needed. But by his own admission, he didn't want to marry again anytime soon. So when he started courting a third girl, recently broken up from a 3-year boyfriend relationship, and in her own words, ready to settle down, Jack saw the signs. Now, these two examples are pretty obvious. Drinking bourbon in the morning, pretty obviously have a drinking problem before you go to work. Saying that you're ready to settle down, that you're on the move for a husband, pretty obvious. But there are some examples that are more subtle signs. I call them blind spots when I work with clients. Blind spots tend to emerge from childhood or very early training from a romantic partner. What our parents taught us about relationships is deeply wired, but so too is what we got from our early romances. Marriages or otherwise committed relationships occurring before leaving the, shall we say, mid-20s, when we're still very vulnerable. An example, Linda is a fun-loving, boisterous New Yorker who works in the entertainment industry. Mid-40s, she has a flavorful vocabulary. When a new love interest, Joe, responded to a particular expletive with, "Oh, I don't really use that word," Linda didn't see it as a big deal. When she reported it to me in a therapeutic session, I had to beg to differ. Her words to me were, "I'll just have to clean up my language around him." What Linda had learned from her parents is to be what they wanted rather than who she actually was, and to fit in, to go along in order to get along. And that's what she was about to do with Joe again. The very people who should have taught Linda to be her own woman, instead of taught her to be a chameleon, had set her up for this situation, her parents. And here it was happening again, a perfectly delivered sign, almost as if it came from her fairy godmother. Joe would ask her to be someone that she was not. Another not so obvious example from another client, Margot, a 34-year-old attorney. When she started seeing Tim, another attorney, she thought she had met her soulmate. Why? Because she couldn't stand to be without him. She was okay once her day started, but when they parted, either in the morning after an adult sleepover, or if he left in the evening, she found herself deeply sad and lonely. She saw this as a sign that they were meant to be together, that they were soulmates, her words. When explored more deeply, it emerged that Margot's loneliness was something she had learned in childhood from a mother who was rather cold and had failed to fill her daughter's emotional needs with security and love. And indeed, when she further explored her relationship with Tim, it was apparent that he could not do that either. Margot's mission to break out of the cycle of emotional unavailability, find someone who met her emotionally, met her at that same level, so that parting was sweet rather than the residue of unfulfilling time together. I don't wish this to get too long today. I've given you a few examples of signs, so let's briefly talk about how to work with them once you see them. Number 1, notice the discomfort. Sit with it rather than pushing it away. I'll put a link here to 2 recent videos on working with your intuition. Number 2, journal it. If journaling doesn't feel comfortable, ask yourself why. Ask yourself, what do you know that you don't want to put in writing? And I'll add a link here to another recent video on telling yourself the story of your life through journaling. Number 3, act on the signs. Actually act on them. If it's a potential relationship, it may be that you dodge a bullet and move on before anything much happens. You might maintain a friendship this way as well. If it's a new relationship, you may well be sparing feelings on both sides by nipping it in the bud early on, as in the example of Carla. Or you may want to talk it through and then continue to watch the signs. If it's a long-time committed relationship, you'll definitely need to talk and then see if that helps. See if a heart-to-heart talk begins to set things straight. But don't get stuck on the idea that you can't bust out. There's always an escape hatch. And for those of us who are not in a relationship at all and not really looking for one right now, it's a great time to work on you. I personally did that work on me a few months back. I spent most of last summer working on me. And then I trialed the same format with several clients this past summer. And what emerged was a book, Raising Your Inner Child, a workbook for life, really. It's a workbook for working on you. And that later became an online course centered around the workbook. And I'll put a link to both here in the description box so that you can have a look and see if that might be something that would help you in your evolution. So that's what I have for you today. I look forward to seeing you on a Wednesday for my midweek sneak peek as to what I'll be talking about next Sunday. In the way of an early teaser, I've been asked recently to get back to the topic of narcissism. So I might address the topic of what happens when the narcissist wants to talk and you don't. That might be what I'm coming up on next Sunday. We'll see. Join me for my midweek sneak peek on Wednesday to find out. I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, have a wonderful week.